Hello everybody and welcome back to Robert's Reviews. Today we are continuing, it's not really more of a series as much as I watched the prequel last week because I had to watch this one for school. For those of you who don't know, I am in a movie class where we kind of study movies and stuff, and I had to watch this movie this week, so I watched it, and I figured I might as well review it, but I wasn't going to not watch the first one, so I watched the first one last week. If you guys haven't seen that review, go ahead and check it out on the YouTube channel. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about Aliens. Aliens was released in 1986 and was written and directed by James Cameron. Before we get started, first of all, this is a non-spoiler review. So if you haven't seen Aliens, not a huge deal. You're welcome to watch the review anyway. And second of all, Aliens is the dumbest name for a sequel to a movie that is called Alien. It's like, yeah, we get it. There's going to be more. But, like, can you tell us any more about the plot in any way, shape, or form? I feel like this movie is more of a redo than it is a sequel. While it does build upon your knowledge of the first one, you can totally watch this one without having to see the first one. And honestly, it won't destroy the idea of the movie. They mention a lot of it anyway, and almost kind of belingered the point. Which brings me to my first point. I think that the exposition for this movie, I can't decide if the exposition is too short or too long, right? They did the same mistake with the first one, where they had so many characters that were not at all involved in the plot, really, that they were like, okay, well, what if this guy, dies, but, it has an emotional impact? And it's like, it won't have an emotional impact if we don't know the character, right? Like, every time that somebody would get into any sort of peril, I didn't care. Unless it was Sigourney Weaver or the kid, I don't care. It makes no difference to me whatsoever, which is a problem, because when you're watching a movie, you want there to be stakes, right? There's a reason why when we watch Avengers Endgame, we're crying when our favorite superheroes die. Because we've been with them for so long, we know them very well. And it's harder to build an exposition in a single movie, I agree. But we had a movie before this, which is why I liked Sigourney Weaver's character. But we got all new characters that just, in general, just didn't make sense. They're like, oh yeah, these guys are our crew. And we're like, okay, fine. But then they're like, let's give them a little bit of character. Like, let's have this girl be very manly. And it's like, okay, great. And then, like, they didn't really do anything with it. So it kind of sucked. I skipped the synopsis. Essentially, Sigourney Weaver wakes up from being asleep for a long time, which follows the movie Alien, and then she goes back into space to kill all the aliens with another crew, because they decide they want to kill them all. And the plot's very similar. The only difference is that they know kind of what they're up against, but they don't really know all of the details, so it's like the same movie, but like a little bit better. Again, the exposition is so long. But once we get past the exposition of the movie, it picks up speed really quickly. Once we meet the kid, it gets a lot better. The kid is the core of this story, in my opinion. Without the kid, this movie would have been a failure, easily. Like, with the kid, we realize, oh, we kind of have sympathy for the kid because it's a child. And then we also realize that we understand that Sigourney Weaver here is kind of like a mother to this child. And it's a nice little connection we can make here that makes us like the character even more than we already did, which we did. We like the character a lot. We're supposed to. But they didn't have any of those same connections with any other member of the crew. So it's hard to kind of attach emotions and feelings to these characters that honestly just don't really matter. But in general, I think it does pick up the pace quite a bit. And toward the middle and towards the end, it gets really fun. Like, once we get into, like, the action sequences and the really deep sci-fi looking alien stuff, it gets better because we get to see that stuff. And it's almost all practical. It's gotta be. First of all, because it's in the 80s, and second of all, because it looks like it. It looks extremely practical, but in a way that doesn't look fake either. You're like, whoa, that's a really cool looking alien. Well, no, he's not CG, so that's pretty cool. The puppeteering was really great. There had to have been puppets of some sort. It was really cool. I like the little aliens and the giant aliens. That they were all worked really well aesthetically for the movie they were going for. I just don't really like sci-fi movies in general. I like horror movies. I do. I like horror movies quite a bit. but I don't like sci-fi movies, and so this is a sci-fi horror pick, um, which I guess sci-fi and horror kind of go hand in hand almost. There's a lot of movies that are sci-fi, thriller, horror, and this just really felt like, I know that I'm young, okay, I'm only 20, so like this is gonna sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but it is kind of cliche or redundant to me. But that's because I've also seen all the other movies that Aliens has spawned, right? Aliens was one of the first sci-fi thriller movies that was like popular. I get that. Back in the 80s, this movie was probably really cool. However, I think that people that grew up in the 80s and watched this movie, they probably only remember it for the really cool alien sequences and the fights and maybe the kid. I don't think they realized that this movie had such a long exposition that wasn't very good. I think they just are looking back on it very fondly, like from their childhood, and be like, oh yes, Aliens is one of the best movies of our ages. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as I think people remember it to be. I just don't think it is. Again, it's not bad. It's not entertaining. Like, in my opinion, it's way more entertaining than the first one, because the second act ramps it up really fast, and there's a kid, and I really do have a thing for kids. Not babies. I don't like babies, but like kids, I care. So there's a kid in the movie, I'm generally going to like the kid. So I also really love coming of age stories, and while this is not at all a coming of age story, in fact not even close to that age range, it did kind of feel a little bit more like that because we also had Sigourney Weaver as a mother per se, which I really enjoyed. Let's talk about some of the acting. First with Sigourney Weaver as Ripley. I think that she got even better in this one, honestly. Even from the beginning. I didn't like how the beginning, they had these weird sequences where she would like, wake up, and then you're all scared again. And like, they did it like 3 times, and you never really know what's a dream and what's not a dream. So that wasn't very smart, I think. It was very confusing and disorienting. Which I guess might have been the point, but I didn't like it. I think she overall was really, really good here, especially considering she's allowed to be more of a motherly figure here, which I wasn't expecting in the movie. I hadn't seen the trailer. I knew nothing about it. I just watched it. I liked her a lot. I really did. I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that she's allowed to be super badass, but also be a motherly figure for Newt. And to allow those two to kind of mix together was really fun and really good, particularly in the last sequence when it's just those two. And like they're just running around trying to figure out how to live. And it's honestly, it works way better than I thought it would, because I kind of was like, okay, well, this is going to be way too many characters because we have too many side characters. But Newt becomes a main character, and we get to know her more. She actually has a backstory, which is insane for this movie because like they don't like to give out backstories. But I really liked her backstory, and I think it worked really well with Sigourney Weaver's backstory. And it really did merge into a really cohesive story that I think Sigourney Weaver really helped with. Without her, I don't know if this movie would be successful at all. I really don't. If they just rebooted the series, I don't think it'd be as good. I wouldn't hate a reboot if they tried to make it more interesting in terms of backstory and stuff, but nowadays it would be all CG and all that stuff, which I don't have a problem with CG. I really don't. I mean, I think that some of the greatest movies of all time have a lot of good CG in it. Like, I mean, I don't think Avengers Endgame is one of the greatest movies of all time, but it has some really good CG effects, which can really enhance a visual. But that's a different story. Sigourney Weaver is really good in this movie, and I've seen her in quite a lot of things at this point, and I haven't been disappointed yet, so maybe in the future I will watch more of her. Next, Carrie Henn as Newt. So Newt is a little child in the movie, and she doesn't have a whole lot of lines, but she's got a really cool backstory where like her parents died and stuff, and her brother died and all that stuff, and left her abandoned on the ship with all these aliens. And she's basically just been living and fending for herself for all this time, which really makes you connect to the character, right? Because you're like, oh wow, we want her to live and go on and live in the world and stuff, which really was nice, and it gave Sigourney Weaver something to do other than shoot a gun, which was nice. She was really good child acting, and then this is the only thing she ever did, and then she moved on and became a teacher, which, good for you. The world needs teachers. However, I feel like you would have been a really good child actor if you decided to pursue that path, but I respect your decision. That's okay. But overall, a really slow beginning to a really, really good ending. Overall, really not a bad movie, but not a very good movie either. I had a good time watching it, but I probably will never watch it again. And so I'm going to go ahead and give Aliens a B+. Aliens, I believe, is available on HBO Max. If you have HBO Max, you can go check that out. Let me know what you guys thought about Aliens in the comments down below. I love talking in the comments, so make sure you guys check that out. Check out the comments, join in the conversation. I love it. It's one of my favorite things about being YouTubers. I can just respond to comments and build a community. So make sure you guys are doing that. Please consider subscribing, liking the video, and as always, keep watching movies and television, stay educated, and I'll see you guys in the next video.